My life was as organized as the project plans I managed. I lived in a small but comfortable apartment in the city, worked as a project manager for a major tech company, and had a stable, if not thrilling, routine. For years, I had poured everything into my career, believing that hard work and loyalty would lead to success. I was wrong. My world was about to be turned upside down by a single, abrupt decision that would force me to confront the real meaning of loyalty and betrayal. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The setup, the perfect opportunity. I had been at the company for 8 years. 8 years of late nights, skipped lunches, and weekends spent polishing presentations. All of it was leading up to this. A huge new project was on the table, a high-profile merger with a smaller, innovative startup. The kind of project that could make or break a career. My boss, the senior director, David Thorne, had pulled me into his office to talk about it. "Morgan, this is the big one," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "I need someone I can trust to lead it. Someone with your history and dedication." He talked about the opportunity with such sincerity that I was completely convinced. This was it. The promotion and recognition I had been working for. He spoke about me taking the lead, about being his right hand, about the company's future resting on my shoulders. I left his office feeling a mix of elation and pressure. He had put so much faith in me. I was ready to prove him right. For the next few weeks, I was in constant contact with David, attending strategy meetings and pulling together the initial team. I was getting the lay of the land, meeting with the top brass from the startup we were acquiring. I was officially in the driver's seat. David even introduced me to Olivia Vance, our new human resources manager, saying, "Olivia is here to make sure we're fully supported on the people side of things. She'll be an important resource for you." Olivia smiled, shook my hand, and gave me a warm, professional nod. I saw no red flags. I felt unstoppable. I was living the dream. I spent countless hours building the foundational framework for the project, analyzing data, and preparing for the next phase. My colleague Chris Evans was my sounding board during this time. We would often grab coffee and brainstorm, poring over the details. He was a software engineer, sharp and insightful, and his technical perspective was invaluable. He always said I was the most diligent project manager he'd ever worked with. His faith in me was another pillar of my confidence. I was on the brink of something truly great. The email came on a Tuesday morning. It was from Olivia, the HR manager, with the subject line, "Important meeting regarding your role." The tone felt off, too formal and rigid. I immediately felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I went to the meeting room where Olivia and David were waiting. The air was thick with tension. There was no friendly small talk. David didn't even make eye contact. Olivia spoke first. "Morgan, we're having to make some strategic changes due to the project. Your position has been made redundant." The words hit me like a physical blow. Redundant? Just 2 weeks ago, David had said I was the cornerstone of this project. I looked at David, searching for an explanation, for a sign of a misunderstanding. He just stared at the table. "David, what is this?" "We just started the merger project. You told me I was leading it." I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. He finally looked up, a blank, almost cold expression on his face. "Things change, Morgan. The company is moving in a different direction. It's just business." I felt a dizzying mix of disbelief and anger. How could he do this? After all the years, all the effort, I was being discarded without so much as a proper conversation. I gathered my things in a blur. Chris saw me and came over. "What's going on?" he asked, seeing the box of my belongings. I just shook my head, unable to speak, and walked out. My career was over. My world had imploded. I was out of a job, and without an explanation. The next few days were a fog of shock and grief. The anger simmered just beneath the surface, but the primary emotion was a profound sense of loss and confusion. What happened? Why? I tried to call David, but his number went straight to voicemail. Olivia's emails were perfunctory and unhelpful. A week later, I filed for unemployment benefits. I filled out the forms carefully, detailing my years of service and the circumstances of my termination. I was confident I would be approved. The company had laid me off. It was their obligation. I wasn't expecting any issues. A few days later, I received a notification from the state unemployment office. My claim had been denied. The reason? Voluntary resignation. My heart pounded in my chest. Voluntary resignation? I had been fired, plain and simple. I had not quit. This was a lie. A blatant, malicious lie. The company was claiming I had left on my own accord, which would disqualify me from receiving any benefits. I felt a searing rage. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle. They had fired me, and now they were trying to ruin my reputation and leave me with nothing. The betrayal went so much deeper than I had initially realized. I felt like I was sinking. The denial was a wake-up call. This wasn't just a simple case of, it's just business. It was a calculated move to discard me, cover their tracks, and leave me in a difficult financial position. They weren't just ending my employment. They were trying to erase it. I knew then that I wouldn't let them get away with it. My first call was to my former colleague, Chris Evans. I told him what happened, including the denied unemployment claim. His voice was full of disbelief. "Morgan, that's insane," he said. "I can't believe they would do that. I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" I explained the situation and told him I needed to find a way to fight back. "I need proof, Chris. I need to show I didn't resign." Chris was a rock. He told me to stay strong and that we'd figure it out. He suggested I reach out to other former employees. He reminded me of a few who had been laid off in similar, confusing circumstances in recent months. I started my digging. I contacted former colleagues on LinkedIn and through old email addresses. The more I reached out, the more a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Another project manager, Sarah, had been let go a few months earlier. Her story was almost identical to mine. Promised a big role, then summarily dismissed. She had also been told her position was redundant, and to her shock, found that her unemployment claim was denied because the company had reported she voluntarily resigned. She had no proof to fight it. Another former developer, Ben, shared the same story. A different department, a different project, but the same sudden termination, followed by the same bogus, voluntary resignation report. It was a well-practiced, sickening routine. I also discovered something else that was even more alarming. The massive merger project that David had promised me was suddenly being led by his nephew, a recent college graduate with almost no experience. It was obvious what had happened. I had been used as a pawn to do all the initial heavy lifting, the groundwork, the research. Once the path was cleared, David simply disposed of me and gave the project to someone in his family. The emotional betrayal was now combined with financial fraud. I had been a stepping stone, and now I was being treated like garbage. My anger grew colder and sharper. I knew what I had to do. I compiled all the information I had. The denial letter from the unemployment office was my primary evidence. I had my termination email, which was vague but did not mention resignation. I had the testimonies of Sarah and Ben, who were willing to write sworn statements about their identical experiences. I also had the new organizational chart I had found on a company server that listed David's nephew as the new project lead. The evidence was building up. I also researched who was in charge of unemployment claims. I found that the State Attorney General's office has a division that investigates unemployment fraud and corporate malfeasance. They take these things seriously. I knew an individual complaint might get lost in the shuffle, but a pattern of fraud affecting multiple employees? That would get their attention. The company was not just lying about my claim. They were lying to the state, committing a crime to avoid paying a few $1,000s in unemployment taxes. I drafted a detailed professional email. I made sure to stick to the facts and avoid any emotional language. I outlined my employment history, the circumstances of my termination, and the subsequent denial of my unemployment claim. I attached the denial letter as an exhibit. Then, I included the sworn statements from Sarah and Ben, each detailing their own similar experiences. Finally, I attached the new organizational chart showing David's nephew in the role I was promised. The email was a comprehensive dossier of deceit. I read it over a dozen times, meticulously checking every detail. I was calm, deliberate, and resolute. There was no going back. I had the evidence, I had the plan, and I had the resolve to execute it. It was a Friday morning, right before the weekend. I knew from my time at the company that this was when executives were most likely to be checking their inboxes for the last time before the weekend. I pressed send. The email was addressed to David Thorne and Olivia Vance. In the CC line, I placed the email address for the State Attorney General's office, along with a few other key individuals at the company, including some members of the board of directors that I knew were sticklers for corporate ethics. I made sure to give the email a short but punchy subject line regarding my final paycheck and misconduct. I did not mention the Attorney General in the subject line. I wanted them to open it and be completely blindsided. My phone rang within minutes. It was David. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. Then a call from an unknown number. It was Olivia. I didn't pick up. She left a frantic voicemail. "Morgan, what have you done? You need to retract that email. This is a huge misunderstanding. Let's talk about this. Please call me back." I could hear the panic in her voice. The calm, composed HR manager was gone, replaced by a desperate, worried woman. I smiled. My phone was blowing up with texts and calls, but I ignored them all. I didn't want to talk. They had their chance to talk when they fired me and lied to the state. Now the state would do the talking. The ball was in their court. I felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The power had shifted. It was no longer them against me. It was them against the law. The fallout was swift and spectacular. The company's legal team contacted me immediately, not to fight but to negotiate. They offered me a settlement. They wanted me to sign a non-disclosure agreement and to retract my complaint with the Attorney General's office. They promised a large sum, far more than my unemployment benefits would have been. I consulted with a lawyer I found through a friend. He told me that this was a classic move. They knew they were caught. The documentation from my former colleagues, combined with the evidence of David's nephew being given my project, was a clear and compelling case of fraud and nepotism. The Attorney General's office had already opened a preliminary inquiry. I refused to sign the NDA. I wanted my story to be public. I wanted justice for Sarah and Ben and all the others who had been unjustly denied. I negotiated a deal for them as well. The company was forced to back pay all the denied unemployment claims for every employee they had fired and lied about. They also had to admit, in writing, that my termination was a layoff, not a voluntary resignation, and that my claim had been mishandled. The company was also forced to pay a large fine to the state for their fraudulent practices. As for David Thorne, he was placed on immediate leave and resigned a few weeks later. The company wanted to make it clear that his actions were not sanctioned at the corporate level. His nephew was quietly moved to another department. Olivia Vance, the HR manager, was also dismissed. The company underwent a major internal audit, and a new HR head was brought in to rebuild trust. I took the settlement money and used it to start my own project management consulting business. It was what I was good at, and now I had the freedom to do it on my own terms. My clients appreciated my no-nonsense, honest approach. I was able to hire Chris as my first employee. He helped me build my website and brand. We're a great team, just like before. I was still a project manager, but now I was the one in charge. The betrayal had not broken me. It had set me free. My life had a new purpose, and I was finally truly happy.